There is no conference that can benefit more in the realignment space in 2024 than the good old Pac-12.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, and more. And record predictions, my favorite time of year. Getting you ready for the season. Always got you covered. This episode brought to you by friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. FanDuel's hooking up all customers this summer with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, including college football, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Georgia Tech. Yeah, you need to know about Georgia Tech, especially if you're an ACC fan. We'll talk about that later on today's show. What is Washington State's record going to be? Well, that matters a great deal. So, Teresa Gould talked to John Canzano recently in an hour-long interview. If you're a Pac-12 fan, highly recommend checking it out if you have not already. But the interview covered a range of topics, and Gould talked pretty openly and honestly about what the Pac-12 needs to accomplish this year. And when asked about how important winning is, this was not only a question she didn't dodge, she embraced it. I mean, she set the stage with her response saying, yeah, you got to win. Yeah, it's important. I'm paraphrasing it. This is not a direct quote. But the tone and tenor of the quote was the importance for the Pac-12 to win this year, to set themselves up positively on a couple of fronts, which I'll get to in a moment, is very real. Can Oregon State and Washington State win this year? Yes. Win what exactly? Just be good. Anything 8 wins and above, I think keeps your head above water. 7, I think kind of depends. If you move into, dare I say, the dreaded no bowl eligibility territory, that's when things could start to spiral. Because if Oregon State and Washington State go out and in their first year, right, this is the first impression everyone's going to have of them in the new conference. They have a G5 perception because they're playing a lot of Mountain West teams. They're in the West Coast Conference with other sports, and they're not in a Power 4 league. So they're looked at, and they're getting a college football playoff revenue distribution greater than the group of 5, but more similar to than what the Power 4 schools get. They have the ability to shape people's opinions. And Canzano's written a lot about this, and I think he makes an interesting point. What is the marketing appeal going to be for Oregon State and Washington State? How are they going to brand themselves? How are they going to stay at the forefront of people's minds? I think having a television contract with the CW, making those games watchable, having some games on Fox as well. I think the visibility factor with television, I think they are set on that front. But what sorts of campaigns, what sorts of efforts, what sorts of promotions, what are you going to do on game days? What are you going to do throughout the course of this year to show everybody else in the country, hey, we belong with all of you at that level? That you shouldn't look at us and say, they can be in the Mountain West, that's okay. How do you get people to wrap their minds around how wrong what has transpired is and how inaccurate it is? I think there are promotional considerations, marketing considerations. They've got the television part, but the winning part has to come with it. And that's where this gets interesting, exciting, but also nerve-wracking. If you're Oregon State, I'm theorizing here. I'll make my Washington State prediction later in today's show. I've already predicted Oregon State at 8-4. I think they could go 7-5. That's probably more likely than 9-3. I think Oregon State lands on 8-4. If they win 8 games, and let's say Washington State wins 9 games this year, you are not hurting your perception. You're helping it. You're at the very least stabilizing it. If you both win 10 games this year, you're helping. Hey, they're not taking a step back. They're just playing at this sort of level. If you both win 6 games, or one of you wins 7 and one wins 5, suddenly you got problems. And the problems come on 2 fronts. Number 1, you have to make yourself as appealing in the long run to the Big 12 or the ACC to try to finagle your way to get an invite there. That's not coming in the short term, though. What is in the short term is rebuilding the conference. If you are the Mountain West teams, the cream of the crop, best of the best, the teams that Oregon State and Washington State would want to poach to form a new look Pac-12 with and make a league that, is among the premier, at the very least, group of 5 conferences in all of college football, is the appeal as strong for Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, Colorado State, UNLV, and maybe Air Force or Wyoming to go over and make that league if Washington State and Oregon State immediately can't compete at the highest level? Is that appeal there? Because if Oregon State and Washington State go out and they combine for 17 wins this year, and their combined record is 17-7, and they've got a couple Power 4 losses, but they're doing really well against the Mountain West, then the allure of leaving the Mountain West to go play with Oregon State, Washington State becomes much more real. It becomes much more feasible because you look and say, oh, they actually are the teams that we think they are. They are the programs that we believe they can be, where they're at the top of the league, and being affiliated with them makes us look stronger. It makes the league better. Being with Oregon State and Washington State and 6 schools is a stronger position as we try to get, access to the college football playoff as the highest ranked G5 champion. It's a better place to be over there than it is to be dragged down in their viewpoint by schools like New Mexico or Nevada or Hawaii or, schools, San Jose State, that traditionally, not every single year, that traditionally don't add anything to the league. So that's why this year is just so critically important. It's like there's a double importance on every single game. Do you win? And then what does the outcome of that game mean? And some games are different. Moral victories are in play. When Oregon State plays Oregon, they're a 20.5 point home underdog. If they lose that game by 13 points, the first year after their roster was decimated, their coaching staff left, and Oregon loaded up to win a national championship or compete for that sort of level, if the final score of that game is 35-24, kind of competitive, and Oregon just holds on late but never pulls away, how good does that make Oregon State look? Really good. If Washington, who brings in a high-profile head coach and a much more highly rated transfer portal class than Washington State, if they, as 7.5 point favorites in the Apple Cup, need another game-winning field goal, what does that do for Washington State? You can't lose your brand power entirely on this season or in an individual game, but you start to take steps. And steps can be taken forward or backward. And that is why it is so critically important. And Teresa Gould agrees, and I'm glad she sees it the same way that I do and is willing to say that publicly. It may not be the most comfortable thing for Oregon State and Washington State fans, but this is one of the most important seasons ever in Corvallis and Pullman. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. If you're an ACC fan, are you aware of what's going on in Atlanta? You should be. That's coming up next. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop, but we haven't had playoffs in a while. College football isn't here yet, but the good news is FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that you're in the mood. Plus, they have everything you want for college football. I mean, everything. Individual games, win totals, conference title odds, national title odds, Heisman odds. It's all over there. It's just fun to poke around, see where they value your team against another on the schedule this season, particularly in week 0 and 1, all of which are over there. Every single game is available to wager upon or glance at the very least. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. They have something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Georgia Tech generating recruiting buzz. Look, it's not something I've said on this show before, but that's where we're at because the Yellow Jackets, yes, those Yellow Jackets, at the moment, have a top 20 recruiting class in 2025. That's Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network, brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And Brian, Josh Petty is the big commitment that Georgia Tech and Brent Key and company were able to land. 5-star offensive tackle. How did he wind up down there?
He's an academic kid. Georgia Tech's a great school, and he lives like 5 minutes north of Atlanta. That's part of it. But they also did run the ball really well last year, had a 1,000-yard rusher. Maybe they just kind of sold him on the long-term version. And again, academics were important to him. But I'm not sitting here thinking that 2 months ago there was any shot this was going to happen. Give credit to the staff for the Yellow Jackets. They were persistent because Tennessee wanted him, Ohio State, Florida State. I mean, programs that have been a lot better than them, and they won. You know what? Clap for them, because that's not what anybody picked.
Yeah, and he's a guy who certainly could make an instant impact as a freshman, but like Lincoln Cure going to Kansas State, it's more about what the recruitment means than the actual player himself. Not that he isn't an incredibly talented kid. Those schools wanted him for a reason, but the fact that Georgia Tech worked themselves into a position to land one of the top offensive tackles in a recruiting cycle. This is a program that over the last couple of years, their high school recruiting classes have been outside the top 50 in all of college football, and all of a sudden they're sitting 20th right now. I don't know if they stay at 20th in the 2025 cycle, but if you're an ACC team, one of the reasons I'm talking about this on today's show as we gear up for the season, if you're an ACC team, you do not want to see Georgia Tech start to get their feet on the recruiting trail in the Atlanta area. In a couple of years, FSU and Clemson will be gone, and there's going to be a power vacuum. And it feels like Georgia Tech, with a move like this, if they make more like it, are trying to get into that upper echelon of the conference.
That is a dangerous program because of location. I mean, for those that don't know, GT is literally in the city.
Yes, of Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's so many prospects within a 40-mile radius. It's insane. So, I mean, I don't know if he's going to be the answer. There's a lot of respect for him amongst those in the industry and the media side. Recruiting's still the key, though. And beating Georgia and Tennessee, Alabama, Florida State, that's not easy. He just needs more of these. That's the first one. Need a lot more like it.
Yeah, you do. And I want to correct myself really quickly. Their overall rank, combining the transfer portal, was outside the top 50 the last couple of years. They did pull a top 35 class in the 2024 cycle, which was a significant step up, and that was kind of Brent Key's first full cycle. He was the interim. He was the full-time head coach last year, and I don't think Georgia Tech this year is a team that I see propelling themselves to the top of the conference the way an NC State or Virginia Tech could after knocking on the door previously. But I don't think Georgia Tech's going to be at the bottom. They're going to be closer to the top of this league than the bottom of it. And I just think about the long-term prospects of this program, Brian, in the Atlanta recruiting area, and think, why can't they be a top third ACC team every year if Brent Key has got the T's crossed and the I's dotted?
It takes the right guy to coach there. They don't have as many majors. It's a big-time engineering school, a lot of math, business, that kind of thing. Takes the right kind of kids. But again, they won a national title in 1990 with disciplined football players. You can do it. It's been proven. Now they just got to reinvent the wheel, I guess, and go back to that because too many guys didn't recruit well. Too many guys didn't put enough effort into it. And then there was the option thing. That didn't help recruiting very much at all. So,
I mean, all respect to Paul Johnson on this show, but there did come a time where you needed to migrate away from the triple option because, the Navy, Army, and Air Forces of the world, look, they've got a decent floor at places like Air Force, but the ceiling was always pretty limited. But, I mean, Haynes King, that's a dude at quarterback. You got to cut down on the interceptions, but that's someone who you've seen since he was a high school kid. Like, good football player. You get the most out of him. You start bringing in recruits like this, you could have something.
It's nice to see somebody kind of change, too, because the ACC's pretty top-heavy. Not quite as much as the Big Ten, but Florida State, Clemson, and probably Miami, Louisville, NC State. It's going to be one of those five every year. Georgia Tech would be cool to see. Maybe Virginia Tech looks like they're kind of on the way back up a little bit. Maybe a little variety here. And again, Atlanta's as good a city as there is in the country for high school football in their greater metropolitan area. I'm actually going up there very soon to go watch a big-time prospect in the 26 class. There's always another guy. So if they could just get a few more of them a year, they're already competitive with teams. They beat Carolina last year. If they just got 2 or 3 more really good recruits that are of the Georgia, Tennessee variety, they could be 8-4 just like that. It's not a major switch you're going. But those players, it's just time and effort. So why not Georgia Tech?
Before I let you go, Brian, recently Deion Sanders had a press conference that didn't land well with everyone, and you'd said you had some thoughts on the matter. For those who didn't hear, my takeaway was no matter what your beef with CBS Sports is, you're not helping your program by projecting that way in a press conference. It looks small, it looks petty, no matter what the reasoning is, whether it's coaching rankings or an article here or this, that, and the other thing. Like, you got to be able to just handle that sort of stuff, and I don't think it sends the right sort of message. Maybe I'm looking into it too much, but what was your takeaway to that presser from Deion?
2 things. Number one, Deion is a thin-skinned guy, and a lot of coaches are in general. I think Spencer would agree with that. It's not the easiest profession, but at the same time, they have to take some lumps. In his defense, I don't disagree with Spencer's take. In his defense, sometimes these people that go to, and I deal with some of them, think they can write anything too. There needs to be common ground. The better thing would have been for Deion to call somebody. Somebody wrote something, whatever. You got to call them. Trying to embarrass somebody like that, like you said, it's not going to end well for either side. Because fair or not, there are people that are like CU alums that it's their favorite channel, or they work there, they have a friend there. It's not going to end well. And that's probably not going to help him long-term with his career. Not that Deion's worried about money or anything, but what kind of message are you sending? So it's probably a lot of fault to go around, and I've been told what the reason was, and I get why he's mad, but you can't do it that way. But at the same time, you shouldn't be shocked if you're CBS or anybody else. If you write something that's negative about a program, etc. You got to find a little meeting of the minds. Otherwise, this will just fester. This will just be the tipping point. If CBS or whoever that is comes back and they double down, this will go off a cliff. And that's what I'm afraid of, because Deion's not the kind of guy that's ever going to back down. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah. I don't think he's not gonna roll over and just concede a point or give you something or anything like that. But I think when coaches go to the podium, Brian, at any time, after a game, before a game, media days, whenever you're speaking to a microphone, you should either try to make no news or say something that helps your program. Those should be the approaches, because anything else, I just don't see what the benefit is. It might, feel good for Deion to snap at the guy if he's and look, I think he made a point to not make it personal with that reporter specifically, and I can appreciate that, but still, it doesn't project the sort of image that I think attracts high-level recruits. And yeah, it's Deion. Maybe he's just different, but I don't think that image is what you want for your program and how you want people to view you. And that stuff does matter.
Yeah, there's something to that. The elite recruits, maybe they do or don't want to go around that. I guess more or less. And he needs more of them, obviously, instead of just relying on the portal. And then again, like you said, with his own team, what does that convey? I don't know. He took it personally, and anytime you take it personal, it's probably not going to go well when you start off with a press conference, like, I'm not going to talk to you.
And even if it's valid, Brian, a personal grievance should not be aired in public.
100%.
It should be aired privately behind closed doors, even if it's 100% valid. Like, that's not the time, because I don't think that sends the right message to your players. I don't think it sends the right message to your donors as well. And look, the donors and everybody at Colorado might love him anyway because he brings in so many fans and makes the whole athletic department so much money. That's great. But I think it ratchets up the pressure on him to win, because if you don't win at the level that everybody wants, the calls for your job or for you to be relieved of your duties at that particular job, I think they get amplified with remarks like this, and it's something that people will point to in Colorado. If you get to a point where Colorado boosters are saying, this was a fun experiment, we're not doing this anymore, this is the sort of thing they point to and say, well, yeah, and there was this instance, and there was that instance over there. It's not everything. I think it's one of many things that can stack up.
I couldn't agree more. And unfortunately, it'll end up being bad for all parties involved because whoever the next coach is, they're going to talk about this incident, and CBS will always be associated with it. Even people that had nothing to do with it aren't even working with CBS. That's the kind of thing when you, especially somebody as polarizing as Deion Sanders, that's really hard to overcome. So I hope no other coach in college football takes this approach with anything this year, although I wouldn't be shocked.
Brian Smith, our Lockdown Recruiting Insider here at the network. Brian, always appreciate the time and the insight, my man.
Thank you, sir.
Speaking of the Pac-12, talked about that earlier on today's show. Washington State could do themselves and Oregon State a lot of favors by winning this year. I think they will. It just won't happen early in the season. That's coming up next. First, this episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier, both of which are great for you. Prices that are on the Game Time app, they actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you are looking for. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time for Major League Baseball. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Washington State and Oregon State, they've got to win football games this year. They just do. Now, next week, early next week, reportedly, we're going to have an idea of who Washington State's quarterback is actually going to be. It could be one of two guys who have been battling out. Used to be more like a three-man battle, but now it's down to a couple of guys. And look, are they going to have the same level of production that they had at the high end of Cam Ward over the last couple of years? No, I don't think so. Could you have a quarterback that does a better job not going off script so often, protecting the football a little bit more than Cam Ward had a tendency to do? Yeah, you could find that. Are you going to have the high-end production value? Like, these are the give and take questions that I have about Washington State. But I think they're going to get off to a slow start because the front end of the schedule just doesn't do them any favors at all whatsoever. But I actually like Washington State's roster. When you look at the number of outgoing transfers that they have this offseason, they and Oregon State both have experienced this because of their de facto relegation to, playing a Mountain West Plus schedule this season and probably next year as well. We'll see what they end up doing. And heck, maybe this season has an impact on what you do. Because if you're Oregon State or Washington State, if you win somewhere between 8 to 10 games this year, you could be a more appealing option to a Big 12 team. Because suddenly beating them, well, that's got a little bit of value. Because you win and it's not just, well, we lost to this team. And I'm not saying you could play a high-end conference caliber or conference championship caliber team, but somebody who might need a game that's in the middle of back end, you take any Power 4 game that you could get, and if they could see some value in it, I'm just saying, winning this season has a lot of potential benefits for Oregon State and Washington State, more arguably than anybody else. I think Oregon State ends up going 8-4. I think Washington State ends up going 9-3. I think it's going to be the inverse of what the Cougs had a season ago. I still like Jake Dickert. I still like the staff. I think there are a lot of key players in place. I think they have done a good job in the offseason. They've had a couple of noticeable departures, but if you look at the lineup of guys who transferred out from Washington State this year, not a whole lot are going to other Power 4 schools. So you're not losing, at least on paper, a bunch of guys who, these were high-end starters. These were guys who are going to be key contributors like Cam Ward would have been, or Josh Kelly, who went down to Texas Tech and is going to play in Pullman this year, week 2. We'll get to that game in just a moment. Like those things, those sorts of players, okay, they matter. You lost a couple players in the NFL draft. Okay, I see that. But between Oregon State and Washington State, whose roster do I feel better about? The answer is Washington State. I feel better about the quarterback situation. I feel better about the roster as a whole. And I know more about the head coach. I've seen Jake Dickert for the last several years. I know he's good. I think Trent Bray is good. But I don't know that yet. I think Ryan Gunnarson's good as OC. Haven't actually seen him call a game for Oregon State with this iteration of the Beavs just yet. But for Washington State, they open with Portland State. That's going to be a win. And then I think they're going to fall on tough times. Now, if they win any one of these 3 games that I'm coming on here and predicting them to lose, their season outlook suddenly gets really, really rosy. I mean crimson rosy good. I don't know if that made any sense, but hopefully you get what I'm going for here. Because the back half of this schedule, it's so workable. It's so workable. But they have to endure a stretch. Week 2, Texas Tech comes to town. That's a swap game where Oregon wanted to play Oregon State to continue the rivalry. They were supposed to play Texas Tech. Washington State needed a game after the Pac-12 collapsed. They said, we'll take a Power 4. Texas Tech needed a road game. They're already going to the Northwest. Boom. Texas Tech's going to Pullman. College football scheduling is wild. It's just another data point, a feather in the cap of what I've said for a long time. College football scheduling should be done on an annual basis. Doing it years in advance makes no sense. It is not necessary. Don't listen to anything that anybody tells you along those lines. Texas Tech week 2. I like Washington State, but I like Texas Tech more. They have a better roster. I trust the quarterback situation more. I like Joey McGuire. Pullman's a tough place to play. Ask Wisconsin. Ask anyone that's gone to play in Pullman over the last couple of years. Cougs are tough. The Cougs are tough up there. That's been well established. Texas Tech, I think, can handle it. I think Texas Tech's a real solid team this year. I think they go into Pullman, get that win. Washington's a neutral site game. Washington State's about a 7.5-point dog to the Huskies there. Do not be shocked if that game is close as it was a year ago, which it shouldn't have been. On paper, Washington State, now, by the time that game was played, Washington State didn't look as good as they were early in the year, but they showed what their potential really was. When they went to Seattle and they darn near beat the Huskies, who had to go for it on 4th and 1 and went with the end around to Odunze, I mean, that was some gutsy stuff. They had to dig deep to find that win. Don't be surprised if Washington, with a completely new roster and a completely new coaching staff, has to do it again. I do think they have more high-level players than Washington State, so I'll take the Huskies in a neutral site matchup at Lumen Field in Seattle. Should be a de facto home game for the Dogs. Then Washington State comes back home. They play San Jose State. They'll get back to 500 with a win. Then they go at Boise and at Fresno. They are splitting those games. Now, my guess, lose to Boise State, beat Fresno State. But if this is a 2-0 stretch for Wazoo, look out. Look out. If this is a 2-loss team through their first 6 games, I tell you what, 10-2 is on the table. Because I look at the back half of that schedule, and I think Washington State has got the better roster. I think they have got the better staff across the board. Hawaii at San Diego State, and the Aztecs will be all right, but I don't think they're at Washington State's level yet. Utah State at home. There's a messy situation over there. Bryson Barnes is the quarterback. They might be okay, but again, in Pullman, taking the Cougs. At New Mexico, they're going to be rough. At Oregon State, that's the toughest one. That's the toughest one that'll define whether they keep the winning streak going. But then they get Wyoming, pretty solid team, but they get them at home. The back half of that schedule, if Washington State can find a way to just be 4-2 through the first 6 games of the season, 10 wins is within reach. It is absolutely within reach. Now, is there a mystery element here to Washington State? Yeah, there's a mystery element to what the Cougs can be this year because they don't have several notable impact players from a season ago. Still, I think the core of the team is solid. I think some of the transfers they've brought in are going to make an impact. Guys like Chris Hudson at the wide receiver position, I think is a really, really good replacement for Kelly, who went down to Texas Tech. And whoever ends up being named the starter by Jake Dickert and company, that guy will have won it throughout a true quarterback battle. Now, do I like teams more that return a quarterback or know who their quarterback is in the spring? Yeah. But have we seen teams emerge from a quarterback battle and go on to succeed? Also, yes. And it is entirely possible that this is going to be that this Washington State team is close to what they were last year. Not exactly what they were, but close to what they were last year, which was still a 5-7 football team in a loaded Pac-12. Well, what do you do with a Mountain West schedule if you're 5-7 there? you're probably at least an 8-win team. And I think Washington State's at least an 8-win team. I'll go with 9-3. Schedule works out pretty well, particularly on the back half. That Pac-12 championship, penultimate week in the regular season in Corvallis at Oregon State. That game's going to have a heck of a feel to it. But I think this shapes up pretty well. Early stumbles for the Cougs, but they will figure it out. And if they win one of Texas Tech, Washington, or Boise State, vibes could be higher than they are right now, given all the uncertainty up there in Pullman. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.